Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. It's past almost a year since the Russians crossed into Ukraine or the separatist territories, and based on all the information I acquired during this year, I would like to make a little summary of what I think actually happens in Ukraine, or actually West Russia, Ukraine, the meeting point. So based on all the information I got so far and my knowledge from a previous experience, direct experience and accumulated experience accumulated through reading, exchanging information, lectures, and other kind of methods, this is what I think is happening in Ukraine. Russia too strong. Russia has energy. Russia is a threat. West has to take care of one of the main candidates, adversaries, and not only the West. I think it is the United States which has to do that, because Europe and Russia became a little bit too cozy with their relationship. Economic, I'm talking about, especially in the energy sector, and that cannot really happen because that could pose a how should I put it, a little attempt of a breakaway from the grip of the United States of some European countries. I'm not talking about London and Great Britain. No, they are in between always. So look at what's going on right now. We have like this Russian military, Russian troops with all the auxiliaries that they are, privates, private companies, mercenaries, volunteers, whomever on that side. And then you have supposedly the Ukrainians. Yes, the Ukrainians are the fighters, are the cannon fodder over there. They are the ones that are actively fighting whatever the Russians are bringing. Russia did not employ 30 million of its possible, fight force. It employed maybe 5%, which is about 400,000 people. I'm talking about the Russian military, 300,000 people, that's all. Ukraine, on the other hand, had general mobilization, so they are fighting with everything they got. Now, what's happening? We say that it's Ukraine versus Russia. No, I don't think that's the case. It's the fighters are Ukrainians. But look at it this way. Look at the rest of the world in the terms of Western world, not Africa, Asia, or South America, or anything like that. No, just some European countries and North America, Australia, and basically nothing else. You talk about Japan and that anyway. So these Western countries provide weapons, make weapons, sell weapons, give weapons to the fighters, and the fighters fight here. These guys are financing, these guys are sending repaired or they are engaged in repairing equipment. These guys are training those troops. These guys are sending aid, food, money. These guys are like one, or try to portray themselves, and they act like they're one. Each country sends things, builds things, sends weapons, sends food, sends money, sends clothes, trains Ukrainians to fight, send weapons, repair weapons. There are countries that are repairing military equipment that was used over there and is repairing. So this is basically like a country that has a war on this front right here and uses just one group of people to actively engage the other ones. Look at it. Look, for instance, ignore the rest of the European territory, United States, and so on, and look at Ukraine. Ukraine is like this. Who's fighting? Just here. The rest of Ukraine is functioning to produce things. Produce still gives services, works, the economy goes as it's going, and everything sends to the front, whatever it can send to the front, ammunition, clothing, food, and so on. So expand Ukraine to Europe and to North America, and you're going to find the same thing. It's no difference. On the contrary, these guys are way more wealthy than wealthier than little Ukraine. So these guys act as a country with one front over there and only one group of all this country fighting, and that's the Ukrainians. All the resources these guys build, send over there, money, that's the way it is. And they say, we're not involved. Well, the other groups maybe are not involved, German troops or French troops, but everything else works like Ukraine works without the rest. But as something more. Ukraine cannot impose really sanctions on Russia because Ukraine is small and is poor, and that's the reality. But the other ones attack Russia, but they're not attacked with sanctions. They try to cripple Russia, not on the front over there, but various ways. So they try to work on them, weaken them, kneel them. So this little front with this so-called group will win. And after all this, if they win, which I don't know how that would be achieved, because as I said many times, can't be, let's put it this way, how can Ukraine win? Ukraine wins only in one circumstance. If the leadership of Russia is decapitated, and that's about at least 300 people. Not Putin, Lavrov, Ladies of the Night, Zakharova, Peskov, Shoigu, and Prigozhin. No, not only that. Those are 20 people over there, Medvedev and others. They have to take care of about 300 at once, and then immediately replace those with their weasels. And then that could happen. If that happens, then the West, these guys here, they won. If not, there's no way they win. Militarily, these guys, even if they beat, which is impossible, the Russians back. Why? Because the Russians always have manpower, resources. They will have them. And if you fight only with that group of Ukrainians, they cannot win. And these weapons that these guys send, unless they really switch their economies on a war economy, which there are some idiots are saying, they are saying, this is the word, we fight as long as it takes. Who would say that? Why are you so vested in that? And the story goes, if these guys lose, the Russians somehow, I don't know how and where, will come over them. I don't know where that idea comes from, but anyway, when they say, well, they have imperialistic tendencies, the Russians. Really? How many bases, military bases, does Russia have around the world? Tartur or whatever, it's in Syria, I think one in Kazakhstan, surrounding the launching pad of the rockets when they send them in space. I think there are 2 or 3 outside of the territory of their country. How many does non-imperialistic United States have? Hundreds. So, okay, but because we have to think of this nation in a certain way and the other nations in a different way for whatever reason, like these guys have no sins at all. They never sinned at all. Only these guys somehow, it's such a weasel worldview. Anyway, so this is the way the Russians could lose, only like that. How can the Russians, if, let's say, give this scenario, the Russians are not decapitated, the leadership, but somehow the military is pushed back, the army, somehow they're pushed back. Russia cannot lose because it has nuclear weapons. That means whenever they want, they can stop all this in its track and reverse anything or blow us all up. That's a reality. So I don't know how these guys think will win. There's not going to be a win on the front from this side right here. It's going to be something behind the scenes, covert operation, behind with weasels and all that, something like that, from within collapse. That's the only scenario. How could these ones, guys, how can the Russians win? The Russians could win only when the Western population will get sick and tired, and the politicians, by having their standard of living decreasing due to the economy, sending over there inflation, and so on, and they get tired of all this, and they will start blaming Ukraine, that war, for their lifestyle. Then they will say, we're done. And then they will tell Zelensky or whomever is going to be over there in charge, not in charge, the mouthpiece, okay, now we're going to talk about peace and we're going to rearrange. Nice try, let's talk about it. And both sides, remember, will claim victory. Both sides. None of them will say we lost. Both sides, regardless who lost and who initiate peace talks and whatever, in their books, in the history books, will be we won. The other ones lost. Okay, that's how it's gonna be. Now, when these citizens of these countries will get sick of it because they will not have their Coca-Cola, air conditioning, and cars and money and so on, and food, then that's a possibility to, that would change. That's it. But I've seen countries from being wealthy going very poor, and the citizens not changing course, and they became what they became. I mean, look around. Not even, you don't have to be necessarily wealthy, but free, supposedly free. Look at Germany in the Second World War, or before the Second World War. That's a good example. Look at the Weimar Republic. Those are good examples of so much freedom, but anyway, so that is when they will, the Russians could win like this, when these guys are sick, or the Russians militarily somehow will succeed and pushing again, because the Western countries will be sick of sending military aid and all that aid. Weapons, whatever is needed from you, give it to them. And the Russians will advance, and I don't know how long they could take care of. They're not going to conquer Ukraine unless it's necessary for them to say, now we're going to put something over here that is not going to be a threat to us. And we're going to put a marionette government, and we're going to keep the troops here under a certain kind of occupation, and that will be as it is. And still the West won, and still Moscow won. Both of them won. That's the scenario. And after this, if Russia does not get decapitated, Russia will form the second club, as I said many times, together with China, because if Russia loses here and gets bent over and repeatedly, then next is China, next is India, next is South Africa, the BRICS. The BRICS system, developing economies will be cut off, the Shanghai cooperation will go off, Iran is going to be taken care of, and all will come to a peaceful hegemony of the United States, the ultimate good. Thank God. So that's how I see it. The problem is, what I see here is this craziness, this almost crazy attitude. We fight how long it takes. They don't fight. Those guys are fighting over there. You don't fight. We're gonna support Ukraine as long as it takes. Why? Well, because Russia has to go, not because Russia is going to invade and all that. I mean, you can believe that. I mean, you can believe whatever you want, but always bring evidence. Support it with statements coming from the Russians, with evidence that they prepare doing that. Don't give me the example of Ukraine they invaded Ukraine. Well, does Russia have, let's say, Russians in, let's say France? They have other territories that belong to Russia, let's say? No, so why would they? So if you put the similarity between Ukraine and they're going to invade Poland, why? Was Poland part of Russia? Was it? When they invaded, were they in 39 with Stalin? You know what I mean? Well, you say, the Baltic states, the Baltic states, they know they have them too big of a mouth. Okay, and they've never been Russia. Now, Putin said he wants, no, he never said he wants to create the Soviet Union. What he said about that, he thought that was the collapse of the Soviet Union was the 20th century tragedy. And in his mentality, and not mentality, for the Russians, it is. For the Soviet Union, actually, because the Russians were part of the Soviet Union, right? People always conflate Soviet Union and Russia. Well, no. Ukrainians were also in Soviet Union. So when you say the crimes of Soviet Union, you have to include the Ukrainians too. And not only the Ukrainians, the Georgians, the Moldavians, all these were part of that. People can say, well, but after all, it was Russians. No, it wasn't. Stalin wasn't Russian. Trotsky wasn't Russian. Kaganovich wasn't Russian. Yogoda was not Russian. I mean, so many leaders, criminals, were not Russians. What are you talking about? So just look at the names, go back and study just a few early years of their biography, check their names, check their origin of where they were born and so on. And you're going to find out that there are not too many Russians, even in the Bolshevik Revolution. Remember, it was that Great Britain sent, you remember, an ambassador to assess the Bolshevik Revolution. And he went to Soviet Union and he met with Trotsky, blah, 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 and all those guys. And when he came back, and that's what he wrote in his, he didn't come back then, but he wrote to the British government or whomever sent him. He said the Russian Revolution doesn't have much Russian in it. Now, if you say that nowadays, people will call you names, but go and check it out. Check the names. I mean, telling a factual thing now becomes this or that. Yes, that's where we live right now. But just check the names and check the percentages based on these guys. I can't remember his name, but it's not hard to find him. Anyway, so this is what I think is happening. Is Russia going to collapse? As long as they don't take care of the highest echelon in a week? No. Economically, no. I don't see it politically, socially, militarily. There are weasels, yes, like everywhere, but we'll see. The weasels are here too, so it's not a unity here. As you can, you have to force Germany to come over, you have to force Hungary to come over, you have to push sometimes Macron and so on, so that's not unity. They try to portray it, but, they're like, well, if you work with people like that, that tells you the support here is not the support they try to portray. It's just some elites who have certain kind of interest with certain kind of interest groups, and they say, well, Canada is against that. Not Canada. The government with some weasels. I don't think Canada is, and you represent Canada as a country, but not as an individual. You don't know what the Canadians think. Yeah, Canada rejects that. Not Canada, the government of Canada that you represent by your position, but you don't represent each and every individual. Like you hear people coming from the TV, I represent the, I don't know, let's say the gay community. No, you don't. I represent the Romanian community. No, I don't. I represent myself and a few guys that say, yes, we're with you. That's all. That's all I represent. Or I represent the black community. No, you don't. You represent a few guys, not all the guys that look in a certain way or have a certain kind of culture necessary support you. That's stupid. But again, this is how we are trained here, to think that everybody thinks the same, and that is actually stereotyping. It's actually called a certain way, right? If you think that the whole group thinks in a certain way, and then that's stereotyping right there. That's why when you say, well, let's have diversity, what do you think that if you're going to have more Romanians, you're going to have Romanians thinking over there, like all Romanians think in a certain way? And I pick Romanians, so I don't pick racial groups, because that's basically what the whole, diversity is our strength. Do you think that if you hire, I don't know, a certain kind of race, necessarily that person of that belonging to that race thinks in a certain way, all have the same experience, just like a cookie cutter, pack, 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 pack? No, because if you think that way, that means you're racist. So many things wrong. Thank you very much. Not here, but here too, but it's a different story. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.